Is this the first time in this territory where you met Bruiser Brody, Frank Goodish?
Yeah, that's
What are your early memories of Frank or Bruiser Brody?
sitting in a Waffle House in Odessa, Texas, and talking. We both had just kind of basically started in the business, and we just basically talked about what Frank wanted to be 300 pounds so he'd come to New York, and I just wanted to learn how to be a worker, and we just talk and talk and talk.
What about Puerto Rico? How did you wind up working for?
Actually, boy, we're going to go a whole gamut here. This is about a 2-hour deal if you want to go it.
Definitely.
All right. When I got ready to get into business, I was invited to be in a wedding in Portland, Oregon. The guy that was getting married was Sabu Singh, better known as Jose Gonzales. I was in his wedding. I was an usher in his wedding. And he went to Puerto Rico. He traveled around the United States. He worked here in New York, and he worked around, and he went back to Puerto Rico, and he got to be pretty high up in the Puerto Rican deal. Well, in 1981, I had run my gamut with Dusty in Florida. I had done it as a single, and then I brought Randy in and done it as a tag team. Randy had to go home. We go back to Louisiana. Bill Watts called him back there, and I was kind of stuck for a place to go. Well, I was going to go to Kansas and everything else. Well, finally, phone rang at the office in Florida, and they said, hey, look, they want you in Puerto Rico. Do you want to go? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, here's Jose's number. Call him. I called Jose. Jose, oh, Bobby, come on down here. We're going to give you a push, blah, 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 and everything. I said, okay. So I said, all right, I'll try it. So I flew down to Puerto Rico, and I worked in Puerto Rico, 80, 81. I worked in Puerto Rico. Had a bunch of good talent down there at the time. I worked a lot with, in fact, I managed the Moondogs down there, Spot and Rex. I kind of did a lot of the American interviews because my gimmick down there was that I knew Spanish better than Spanish, and I couldn't speak a word, so it was a disaster. But, and it got over good. And I was working with a lot of the top baby faces, Jose, Victor, Miguelito, Castillo. I was working with all of them. And had a good run. But finally that got over with. So I left and I went to San Antonio. Well, when I got in 85 or whatever it was, I was sitting there, I was in Tennessee, and I was starving. And I needed somewhere to go. And so I got on the phone and I called Jose. Jose says, oh, I got a spot for you, number one spot. Come on in. I said, all right. So I went down to Puerto Rico. So boom, right away, they put the belt on me. Me and Dan Crockett, they teamed us up the first night in there. They put the belts on us. We worked with the Youngbloods. Boom, boom, boom. Everything was going good. I had my own TV show called Caribbean Championship Wrestling, which is another one where I told them I knew more Spanish than they did, and I didn't know crap. So, but by the way, it was the number one TV show on Galavision worldwide. Worldwide, it was the number one show, and it was the number one show in the Caribbean. And I would have guys come on, and like the Spanish wrestlers would come on, and I'd make fun of them and stuff like that, and I had the bull whoop and all that stuff, that I inherited from Dutch. And I would take I'd have like Spivey'd come on, and the Samoans. I'd bring guys on every week, and it was a good show. So I got back into Puerto Rico, and first thing they did is, not the first thing, but after a while, everything was going pretty good. We were all making money, and everything was kind of neat. It's pretty nice when you're only working 3 days a week, and you're making the same money that some guy in the States making for 6 days a week, 7 days a week, So you got 4 days a week on the beach, And so I called my wife and my girls, and I said, hey, come on to Puerto Rico. So they come down to Puerto Rico. Well, we were down in Puerto Rico, and I was, my wife and the girls to come down. You want to hear about the Brody thing? I do. Here we go. Okay. So we were in a little spot show on Friday night, and Victor Quinones, Jose Gonzales, and Brody come in Victor's Mercedes. And they parked on the inside of the ball field. And me and Spivey and a couple other guys and Dan were sitting in the dugout, because you use the dugouts where where you go out to the ring. And we were sitting in there, and Brody it was his first night in the territory, had walked by him and Jose, and Brody turned to me, and since nobody understood English, he says, "I heard your wife's here." I says, "Yeah, Donna's here." I says, "So are the girls." He said, "Hey, look," he says, "we'll have to get together for a drink or for dinner or something." I said, "Okay." I says, "How you doing?" I says, "How's, Barbara, fine, Jeffrey, everybody's fine." That's good. I said, "Okay, big man." I says, "I'll get a hold of you." He says, "Okay, I'll get a hold of you too." Boom. He goes in the other dressing room. So Saturday, we had a whole bunch of things to do because we had a big Bam on show. So there was no way that Bruiser or none of us could get together. Well, I find out on the Big Bam show that Dutch is coming in to work against me, and him and Tony Atlas are going to work against me and Dan Crockett, which we knew about that the week before, but Dutch hadn't got in until that day. And so it was kind of okay, good, this is going to be fun, whatever. And so anyhow, we go into Bam On, and you always got there early because Bam On was such a bear to get into with all the people trying to get in and everything. And we're sitting in the dressing room, and I'll tell you who was in the dressing room with me. It was Abby was in there, Spivey, Sika the Samoans, myself, Crockett, and there a couple of the Puerto Rican guys. Cheeky Star, Hercules, Ayala, we were all sitting there. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, one of the referees comes over, Miguel, and they start talking to the other referee, and hurried talk, like, what the hell's going on? So Cheeky had gone up to listen to the conversation, and they had walked away. So when Cheeky come back, I said, "Hey, Cheeky, what's going on?" She says, "I don't know. Something's going on, but I don't know what it is." I said, "Oh, okay." Well, a little while later, we heard an ambulance. I thought, fucking ambulance. Somebody must have got shot or, Puerto Rico happens every day, So the referee comes back in, they're in a conversation again. So Cheeky goes over and just butts in and says, "Hey, what's going on?" So after they leave, Cheeky comes over and asks, "Cheeky, well, there were all of us for sitting there." I said, "Cheeky, what's going on?" He says, "Oh, they said that one of the wrestlers tripped in the dressing room and got cut on the porcelain sink, and they took him to the hospital." I said, "Well, who was that?" I was worried it was either Dutch or Tony or, one of us,
Right.
And Cheeky says, "Oh, they didn't say who it was." And I says, that's awful fine. They didn't say who it was. So a little while later, Ron Starr was in the dressing room too. So a little while later, they come back again and they start talking again. Cheeky goes over and listens again. Cheeky comes over and says, "Hey, it was Brody." They said that Brody got in a fight in the dressing room and that he fell against the porcelain sink and cut himself. I said, "Wait a minute. Big man get in a fight and fall against the porcelain sink and cut himself? Bullshit. Because the big man can fight, So I says, "Cheeky, tell him we want to know what in the hell's going on now." By now, everybody, all the guys in the dressing room, not just me, everybody wanted to know what was going on. So we went out to the dugout down below and looked across to the heel babyface side, and I looked over there, and Dutch was signaling me something, and I couldn't figure out what he was signaling me. And I thought, what the hell's going on? And then there was Dutch, just a couple other guys in the dugout. Excuse me. And I thought, So me and Dan go back up into the dressing room, and we're sitting there. Finally, Mateo comes over again. When he comes over again, I said, "Cheeky," I said, "you asked this piece of shit what the hell's going on." I said, "Something's going on that we don't know about." And so then that's when they said that Brody had been stabbed, but they said he had been stabbed by a fan. And I thought, well, why would they stab a baby face? So I didn't think nothing of it. So we went to the ring. The match, we were like the third match. They put us on the third match. And Ron Starr was to wrestle against Jose Gonzales that night, which he did wrestle against Jose. Jose wrestled him. Well, we went out in our match, and we got in our match. Tony Atlas just looked bad. You know what I mean? And Dutch looked physically shaken. And so we were sitting there getting the referee's instructions, and I says, what the hell's going on, guys? And Dutch looked me right in the eye, and he says, Jose stabbed Brody. I said, what? He said, Jose stabbed Brody, and Brody's in bad shape. I said, you're kidding me. Well, by now, the referee heard me and Dutch talking, and he tried to split it up. So when we started the match, it was me and Tony Atlas. And Tony Atlas and I locked up, and Tony got a headlock and took me down. And when he took me down, he says, Frank's in trouble. I said, what do you mean? He says, Bobby, when I took his boots off, his feet were blue. Well, anybody that knows anything about that means he's lost a lot of blood. And I said, where's he at? They said, well, it took 45 minutes to get an ambulance, but they got him to the hospital. He said, I had to carry him out to the ambulance. I said, oh, Jesus Christ. So anyhow, we probably didn't go 10 minutes. And we got done. I went right back in the dressing room. I told all the guys in the dressing room. I said, look, Brody got stabbed by Jose. That is from Tony and Dutch. And boy, I mean, right away, Abby turned white. Believe it or not, Abby turned white. Ron Starr said, if I got to work with Jose, check him for blades. And I'm not talking about razor blades, check him for blades. So we went, and I got right after I got showered and everything, I went back to my condo. And Dan come over with his girlfriend, and a couple of the other American guys come over to my condo. And we started talking. And I said, look, where was Frank staying? They said, well, he was staying down in the Condado. And I said, okay. I said, I got to go down there. So I went down to the Condado, and Frank always carried a briefcase. I don't know if you ever knew that, but he always carried a briefcase. In that briefcase, Frank kept everything. His bank statements, his books. I mean, he worked, it was like a work briefcase. Everything. If he had pot in there. Drugs, whatever. I got the briefcase, took it back to my place, and in the ventilation vent of my condo, I put it in there. Because I wanted to make sure that it went to Barbara. I didn't want those people to get a hold of it. Because we thought right away, that there was something pretty bad going on. So I went down to the bar with Dutch, with Ron Starr and Sika, and we waited. And they called us at about, I guess it was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to say that he passed. And when he passed, they called us, and I told them, I asked them, I said, what did he die from? They said he had a ruptured liver. His liver was cut, and they couldn't stop the bleeding. So I went back to the condo, and I said, look, I told my wife. My wife was worried because, she had known Frank since we got married. And I told her, I says, Frank's died. I says, we don't know what's going on. I said, I think the best thing for you and the girls is to get off this goddamn rock tonight. So she said, okay. So we packed all the girls and her stuff up while the girls slept. And I called the airport. 6:30 in the morning, they were on the first plane out of Puerto Rico. Well, we all went down afterwards to the hotel where everybody was staying. They had a big show booked in Mayahuez that Sunday. It was sold out. And the Puerto Rican wrestlers, the American wrestlers got together in the hotel, and we said, bullshit, we're not going. This is bullshit to kill somebody in this goddamn business. And what it was over taxes, because Frank would not pay their bullshit taxes, okay? So don't let it go around that it was over anything else. It was over the goddamn bullshit taxes. But to make a long story short, we got in the hotel. We all decided not to go. The Puerto Rican boys stood with the American boys. Castillo Jr., Miguel Perez, Cheeky Star, TNT, everybody stuck together. And they finally figured out that they had a problem. The cops came to the hotel. We called the cops to the hotel, the investigator. We said, we want this sumbitch prosecuted. Has there any witnesses? Tony says, I'm a witness, but I'm scared. Sika stood up and says, I'll go with you, brother. And the cop looked at Sika and says, I don't think anybody's going to mess with him. So Sika went with Tony to make his statement, and the Youngbloods to make their statement.
They actually saw it?
They saw it, yeah. They were right there. It happened in a shower room with the door closed, but they were right there when Brody staggered out and Jose tried to cut his throat. And they know who took the knife and got rid of the knife. Right, Victor Jovica, who got rid of the knife? Anything else you want to know about it? And believe me, ain't one of them Puerto Rican son of a bitches that can do a goddamn thing to me today. Because I live that goddamn hell all the time.
What are your thoughts of the guys that went back to work for the company?
They had nowhere else to go. I worked there. Do you think any of these guys up in the north of the United States, all these tough son of bitches that were going to go down there and revenge Brody and shit that never got on an airplane, do you think that they would have gave us a job? Shit, no. They didn't care. They like hearing their goddamn voice, but they didn't do a damn thing. At least the guys that stayed there tried to do something. We tried to get justice. We had no support. All these goddamn promoters and shit back here turned their back on everybody. You know why? Frank Brody was out for Frank Brody. But Frank was a truthful man. And I'm not saying Frank was the greatest guy in the world, because believe me, Frank could be a prick. But you had to respect him. And the promoters didn't like him because he stuck up for himself. So they left him out to hang.
How hard was it for you to see Jose Gonzales after all this went down?
How hard was it? When I found out what they were doing, that he was still booking the territory, it really pissed me off, but I had nowhere to go.
Right.
Had nowhere to go.
Thoughts on Carlos Colon?
Spineless. Absolutely goddamn spineless. I thought Carlos was one of my friends. I thought Carlos was a great worker and a good person at one time. After this, spineless.
What about Abdullah the Butcher? Did you ever have conversations
Spineless.
Just because nobody stopped?
He ran off that island like a dog, man.
Did you think that Jose was going to serve some time? I mean, how did he get off?
We all thought he was going to jail. You want to know how he got off?
Money or?
Sure. They paid $1 million to the judge. The wrestling office did. All three of the pricks. Not one, three of them.
Who was it?
And Victor, if you were still alive, Victor Quinones, you would tell the goddamn truth if you had a ball one.
You think Victor Quinones knew?
He knew damn well what happened.
Right. I remember going to Victor's. I went to Puerto Rico a couple times, and Victor told us some stories. He had told us that there was times back in the old days of WWE when I guess Brody was working there, and Jose was in the territory that he took liberties with him, and he thinks that it could have been because of that as well. But
the thing was, Brody took liberties with fucking everybody. Everybody. I worked with him. He took liberties with me. You gave liberties back to him. He never bitched. He never cried and whined and moaned. The only reason is Jose was jealous. Number one, Brody was over more than he was. Number two, Brody was always going to be over more than he was. Number three was Brody wouldn't listen to him when he thought he was a big man on Puerto Rico and pay his goddamn taxes. He told him to go to hell and jam him up his ass. He told all three of them that. Jovica, Colon, and Jose.
Right. How involved was Victor? Did Victor own a portion of the company, I believe, right?
Quinones?
Yeah, didn't he own a percentage of the
You hear everything. They're all they're all secretive. You know how cockroaches are.
Any other things you want to say about the Bruiser Brody incident before we move on?
No, it's they'll all get theirs.
You also down in Puerto Rico got to work a little bit with Ricky and Robert when they came into the territory.
I've worked with Ricky and Robert their whole lives, yeah.
When did you realize that the territories were drying up? Was it when Vince was buying everybody?
Yeah, when Crockett and Vince started their bull crap, that's when it was, the end was in sight. Yeah.
What are some of the greatest ribs that you have seen take place?
The dirtiest? I can tell you about the worst son of a bitch in the world, Fuji. That no good prick bastard. He about killed me.
What did he do to you? Serve your dog, or is that?
No, he goddamn spiked my drink with drugs, and I drove home and totaled out my car. About killed myself.
Wow.
Then that was a big joke to him, but he's a prick. He knows he's a prick. Anybody that said that he's not, they're pricks too. You rib to have a good time. That's the way I always ribbed. You rib to have a good joke and laugh and not hurt anybody. Fuji ribbed to hurt people. He was a sadistic, no good bastard. Whatever he gets, he deserves.
What led you to leaving the business again?
What
led you to leave the business?
Bruiser's death. Eventually, at the end of this is what it all boiled down to. Is I was in a business that was a fantasy business, and I saw what happened when people read their publicity and actually believed it, and it was time. I had kids that were in school that were calling me Bobby Jaggers, and it's not my name. My name is Robert Jedwin, and I'm Dad. I'm not Bobby Jaggers, and it was time for them to learn that, and I needed to be home.
Now, you also had a wrestling school, I believe, right?
Pardon me?
Did you have a wrestling school at all?
Never.
Never? Okay.
Never.
I didn't know if you ever had a school. So.
No, never.
Does the lack of kayfabe today bother you? Or is that pretty much what ruined the business?
It's already ruined.
Yeah.
You can't. This business here, you can't ruin it anymore. You've had murders committed. You have bigamists. You have pedophiles. I mean, you have the worst scum of the earth that perform in this business, and the people still buy tickets. How can kayfabe ruin it?
It's true. What are your thoughts on the wrestler movie with Mickey Rourke?
It's the greatest movie in the world. Some guys ought to look at it. Hogan, Flair, there's a bunchy out there. It's over. You're going to end up as a byline on a movie.
Is there anything you want to say to your fans out there that you never had a chance to say before?
Yeah, I want to thank every one of them for a great ride, man. I mean, I want you to know that every night I went in the ring, the only reason I went in the ring was to be the best that I could be so you people enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to give you 110%. And I just appreciate everything that the fans have ever done for me. I got fans that I never even knew I had, because in my retirement, and my quitting, I've had emails and letters and stuff, and I thank them all. I really do. They were Bobby Jaggers. They made Bobby Jaggers. I've just lived the part. Thank you.
Thanks for being here today with us. It was a great interview.
Great, man. Anytime you want to do it again, we can do it again. I got more about it. I can tell you about Dutch.
Go ahead, you can say it now.
No, I don't want to say it until I see him. I haven't seen him in 20 years. He might knock me on my butt.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.